If I die of laughter during this segment, I don't want you to feel bad. I want you all to know that I died happy because this video is...
Oh, come on. What does that mean?
Take off, it's true.
A landlubber with Manitoba as my final human or otherwise.
Wallace, a mustachioed young guy, co-hosts a podcast with his heavier buddy, Teddy. They swap outrageous stories and often slip into crude, off-color humor, pushing boundaries for laughs that sometimes land and sometimes cross the line. Wallace tells Teddy about a fresh Finda video a follower recovered from an old laptop.
Like a cross-dressing Adolf Eichmann, Liza Minnelli impersonator.
In it, a wannabe samurai practices with a katana and, in a grisly accident, hacks off his own leg. The clip instantly grabs Wallace's attention, and he immediately reaches out to set up an interview with the self-styled swordsman. The guy lives in Canada, so Wallace books a flight, dropping $500 on a ticket without blinking. His girlfriend, Ally, wants to tag along, but Wallace isn't the type to bring company on a work trip. Teddy stays in Los Angeles. He hates flying. When Wallace reaches the Great White North to meet the injured swordsman, he winds up at the man's funeral and learns the subject is already dead. The lead has literally gone to the grave. Frustrated that the interview has collapsed, Wallace heads to a nearby bar for a drink and calls Teddy to vent about the disaster. He complains about the wasted money, the itinerary, the bad luck, anything to drown out the silence and jokes, to mask the sinking feeling that he's come for nothing. After a few beers, he wanders to the restroom. There, pinned on a notice board with thumbtacks and curling corners, he spots a peculiar handbill. An elderly man offers free lodging for the night in exchange for listening to extraordinary stories from his life. That's exactly the sort of material Wallace wanted from Canada. And he isn't leaving without a wild tale. He phones the man and sets up a visit. The voice on the other end is courteous.
Good evening.
Old-fashioned, almost theatrical. On the way, he buys a drink at a neighborhood shop, pours it into a big plastic cup, and asks the clerks for directions to the address. The place sits in a secluded area, an old estate owned by a senior named Howe, tucked past scrub pines and a narrow lane. The old man greets him from a wheelchair and serves tea that smells faintly medicinal. Wallace happily downs a couple of cups while listening to tales of Howe's meeting with Hemingway, savoring the cadence of the story as if he's already cutting the podcast in his head. Wallace tosses off clumsy jokes about the house and even about his host, but Mr. Howe takes no offense. He keeps unfolding a life story steeped in hardship and loss. As a boy, he watched his parents die. He landed in an orphanage where he was abused. After that came a psychiatric hospital. I was raped, he says flatly.
They keep me ambulatory. I still thank the Lord for leaving me with a memory.
I've had things in my mouth no human should ever taste. Yet this isn't the part Mr. Howe most wants to share. He shifts to another memory, the first time he felt true horror. He explains he worked as a cook aboard a ship called Anastasia, which wrecked in the icy northern seas near Kamchatka, the world reduced to wind. The storm was merciless. Waves crushed the hull, and the crew went under. Howard alone survived the freezing water, clinging to a life ring and drifting for ages until a walrus, of all creatures, saved him. Washed up on a bleak island inhabited by this massive animal, Howard would have perished from cold, thirst, or hunger, but the walrus kept him alive and fed him. The bizarre rescue rewired his sense of the natural order. Mr. Howe doesn't finish the incredible episode, because Wallace starts to feel ill-dizzy, vision blurring. The room tilts. He realizes the tea is to blame. He tries to ask questions, but speech fails. And he blacks out. While Wallace is unconscious, we glimpse that he isn't, at heart, a monster. He genuinely loves Ally, who stood by him when he was a nobody, unable to look after himself. Wallace just despises the old, helpless version of himself. That self-loathing fed his cynicism and lack of scruples. By contrast, Ally tells him she misses who he used to be, the soft-hearted guy who could cry at Winnie the Pooh. Her grandfather always said tears marked the soul. Separating people from animals, Wallace comes to, seated in a wheelchair, a blanket over his legs, and sees Mr. Howe standing with impossible calm. The old man explains that a venomous spider bit Wallace the previous day, causing the blackout.
Well, look who's back.
So he called a doctor. The doctor found Wallace's leg in terrible shape, badly swollen, and, to stop the infection from spreading, amputated it. The news and the sight of a knee-level stump horrify Wallace. He doesn't buy the story and demands his phone to call family. But Mr. Howe refuses, claiming the doctor confiscated phones to ensure rest. At dinner,
Shall we dispense with the chafa?
Wallace learns Howard can walk. The wheelchair was just theater to cultivate the image of a feeble elder, a trick that now feels like a trap closing. Down came the rain and washed the spider out. Howe lilts, almost playfully. Unable to move freely, Wallace hears his phone ring in the room. Ally is calling because she hasn't heard from him in 3 days. He can't reach it in time. When he calls back, she doesn't pick up. Ally vents to Teddy about how unhappy she sometimes feels with Wallace and how far he's drifted. Wallace leaves Ally messages, then tries Teddy, who declines to answer even as the screen lights up in his hand. By morning, both Ally and Teddy discover 2 voicemails from Wallace, each message more frantic than the last. He says a madman has abducted him, cut off his leg, and is holding him in a remote part of Canada. His voice shakes. The panic is unmistakable. For Wallace, the attempt to reach the outside world ends in fresh misery. Mr. Howe smashes him on the head with a walrus bone, and he blacks out again. "Your life as you knew it is over, Mr. Bryton," the old man declares, changing Wallace's name like it's already been replaced. When Wallace regains consciousness, the horror deepens. His other leg is gone, and his arms from shoulder to elbow have been stitched to his sides. Several teeth are missing. His tongue is gone as well. He can only grunt like an animal. Mr. Howe tells him walruses cannot speak. That's why he removed the tongue. Then he explains his plan to recreate his savior, the walrus. He named Mr. Tusk, granting it a second chance at life. The intention sounds noble in the worst possible way. In the mansion's basement is a pool with a central platform, an eerie stand-in for the lonely island where Howe once washed ashore with the walrus. The old man begins training his new walrus to swim, preparing him for a walrus's existence. During these sessions, Wallace notices dozens of corpses of past victims who fell into the psychopath's hands. The bones echo in the tiles. The waterline reflects a mass grave. Meanwhile, Ally and Teddy are in Canada looking for him, trading. Worry for action, scraping for any detail that will point the way. Since American authorities can't help, they go to the local police. They question people at the bar. The officers fear Wallace could already be dead. Because of Wallace's prank-filled public persona, the police doubt the kidnapping at first. But they still mark him as missing and pass along the number of a private detective, Guy Lapointe, who might have a lead on the abductor. Meeting the detective offers little comfort. His eyes look tired, but they burn with an obsession that refuses to die. Guy Lapointe says he has chased this maniac for years and lost everything: his job and wife.
All in the pursuit of this butcher of the man.
Considered crazy, he kept searching anyway. He's encountered bodies with lower limbs missing and arms sewn to torsos. When Teddy and Ally are about to abandon his help, he reveals he once met the Mania Kunder, another name, in another place. The trio begins following Wallace's trail. Knowing Wallace's habit of buying giant plastic cups on trips, they visit the store where he stopped. The shopkeepers recall the funny American with the mustache and hand over a notebook with an address.
Yep, I'm American. How are things over at Degrassi?
On their way out of town, the detective, Ally, and Teddy spot Wallace's car, half sunk in a pond, but he isn't inside. Lapointe insists he knows where to find him. He hands out weapons, and they head for the killer's house. They have no idea what's unfolding beneath the mansion at the pool, and frankly, they'd be better off not seeing it. Mr. Howe announces that it's time for a duel. He recounts how the walrus saved him from starvation, then admits he killed Mr. Tusk and ate its meat just before a rescue ship appeared on the horizon.
We survive at all costs.
Ever since, he's lived with regret. He declares the slain walrus superior to people and calls humanity unworthy of life. Mr. Howe dons a walrus suit sewn from patches of skin, with tusks attached to his head mirroring Wallace's, which were carved from Wallace's own shin bones and implanted into his jaw. The fight begins, a nightmare of wordless bellows and meaty thuds. Howard says the contest must be fair, on equal footing. tusks against tusks. He doesn't know that Allie and Teddy are frantically moving through the mansion and that Detective Guy Lapointe is nearby with a shotgun. The clash between the walrus and the man in the walrus suit is savage but brief. At the exact moment, Allie and Teddy finally reach the basement. Wallace rips into the old man, tearing him apart with his tusks. The sight paralyzes everyone. Blood-soaked, Wallace stares at his friends. Nothing human lingers in his eyes-only pain and rage. He grunts, incapable of speech. Detective Guy Lapointe raises his gun at the walrus, preparing to shoot when a voice yells, "No!" The echo, and the moment passes without a trigger pull. A year slips by, slow for the living. Allie and Teddy make their way to the city zoo. Allie carries a long paper-wrapped parcel as they walk toward an enclosure holding a solitary walrus, like mourners than visitors. But the pool and the rocks are empty. The animal hides in a cave and refuses to come out. Allie unwraps the parcel, pulls out a fish, and tosses it toward the cave's mouth. She calls Wallace by name, trying to speak to him while Teddy stands silent at her side.
Wallace!
At last the walrus emerges, gratefully eats the fish, and gazes at his old friends. Allie weeps, recalling her grandfather's lesson. Tears separate humans from animals and prove the presence of a soul. She tells Wallace she loves him, as Teddy leads her away.
I love you, Wallace.
A few tears roll down from the walrus's eyes.